Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Today we have Mr. Tan Kian Aun. Kian Aun is a real estate agent by trade. He is a license holder. He has actually been practicing not just in Malaysia, but he's also had experiences in Australia as well. He has then since come back to Malaysia to extend his real estate business and career. He's currently attached to Hartamas Real Estate. Hi, Kian Aun. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Ernest. Pleasure.
Kian Aun, let's delve into the topic that we actually have at hand today, because what we want to do is to share with our listeners today and our viewers in terms of where you currently see the situation in Malaysia for real estate, especially now with COVID, with the numbers now just breaching 300 again, and the government is saying, wave 3 is coming. Where do you currently see residential property real estate demand in Malaysia currently?
At the moment, I think when the MCO started somewhere in March, then it becomes RMCO, then things slowly are opening up. The way I look at it, I think the property market demand is still there. It's just that people are behaving differently now, because I look at it, there's some new trend that I observe, especially in the young and mid generation people. One thing I notice is that people are now more, they are more aware of their financial situation. So I've spoken to a couple of people, and they are more cautious about the way they spend. They're more cautious about the way they save their money, the way they behave. So that is something that I've noticed for the past few months. Then how it relates back to property is that no doubt property is always something that is to me is a need, right? People still need a shelter. People still need a place to live in, whether they regardless of how old they are, they will probably need to set up their own family. They still need a place. So the demand is still there, but probably the purchasing, the behavior, the buying behavior is slightly different. So nowadays, we need, whenever we sell properties or things like that, is very much cater to their need, more on a consumer demand driven thing, rather than we build something. For example, I noticed those days developers will build whatever they want to build. People will just buy whatever you have. But now I look at it, it's more consumer driven. Is that you don't build whatever you want to, you build whatever the consumer actually demand and want. So I think the demand is still there. Just that the buying purchaser, the pattern is different. Whether they rent or they buy is another issue. So yeah.
Sorry, Kian Aun, are you speaking mainly in terms of Gen-wise, or are you speaking in terms of the market per se, the overall market per se, which includes the Gen X, the baby boomers, and the Gen-wise as well?
I look in terms of more on Gen Y, because the baby boomers, okay, if you talk about baby boomers, there are two types of, let's say I look in terms of sellers. Let's look in terms of sellers. Sellers, baby boomers, they probably have few properties in hand. They invested long time ago, so now some of their properties are probably fully paid off. They don't owe any more bank. So to them, the way they look at it is different. They said that I don't need to sell, I can hold on to it. If you look into Gen Y or Gen X per se, some of them bought a property a couple of years ago and they are still financing it. Then these are the group of people who are currently still, need to pay off. And then the way they behave, probably that, I need to save more for saving days. So even for them to invest in another property, they will probably think twice. What if there's another COVID-19? So there are a lot of people, it creates a lot of uncertainty because nobody expects this. And now the thing is that a lot of people are also thinking, even though this COVID-19, even though if it's over, people will still think that what if there is another one? So that comes into our mind, and that's actually shape our behavior as well.
Can I ask you, if you were to think about this unprecedented situation with COVID-19 and the disruption that it's had, not just in terms of work, but the lives per se in economy, people can't go to work, normal businesses that used to flourish prior to COVID now may have to change drastically. Fixed incomes per se for majority of people may definitely be questioned right now, because if the businesses are slow, then the cycle of the economy will also be slow, and therefore incomes will be affected. Do you think home ownership is a fad? If that's the case, if this new pivot happens and the new economy where a lot of people are unprepared for venture into a situation whereby incomes are not fixed, incomes are not stable, people basically become contractors whereby jobs may not be permanent, and as a result, do you think that home ownership is a fad that's no longer a necessity? People will just become renters for life.
Oh, sorry, I was mute just now. Okay. Yeah. I think there could be a possibility. I look at it because when I was in overseas, when I was in Australia, there are this kind of a mindset to say that it's cheaper for me to rent than to own a property, because owning a property, of course, number one, you need to pay the mortgage, you need to maintain the property, and you even if you buy for investment, you need to have a holding power. What if there's a vacancy, things like that. So you need to have a cost of the holding cost per se. Compared to if you rent, some people say that, because of excess of supply out there, I can rent at a cheaper rate, and I can rent at something that I want, rather than something that's convenient to me, rather than I buy something that even if I change my job, then I still have to travel far. If my family grow bigger, I need to change. But if you rent, I can stay where my workplace is, nearer to the workplace, and the building gets old, I can just change to a new building with better facilities. So people have that kind of mentality, because for them to pay rental could be cheaper than you pay your mortgage, your maintenance, your repair, your quick rent, your assessment, blah, 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 all these things. So there could be the kind of mentality. Now, in Malaysia, because of the price of the property versus the income level of the society, it comes to a level that the property could be kind of out of reach. Right? It will come to a level that's out of reach. So people will say that it's to pay a rental of a house, I need to, or an apartment, I need to pay 2,000. But when I rent, I can rent about 1,300 or 1,400. And that could be something in future, because especially like I said, the Gen Y and even at the Gen Z or Z, you call it people, they don't have that kind of mentality to say that I need to invest in property. I need to keep money for, like those days, our parents, they would, any excess money they put in a property, because during those days, I still remember a single story in PJ, it could cost you only about 100 over 1,000 those days. Now, I think compared to the inflation of the property and the increment of the income, the gap has become bigger and bigger. So people don't see, the younger generation, people don't see a property as a investment return, a good investment kind of thing. So they would want to rent. And it comes to rent, I think we know that the government is also initiating something we call the RTO, rent to own scheme, which indirectly also spur some of the buyer to think that, hey, is it cheaper to rent, or is it viable to buy? So I think that could be a trend. Home people will rent rather than to buy, because of the cost factor things.
I think one of the interesting things that we have seen during this COVID situation is that there is a rise in working from home, either by choice or either because of companies actually wanting to make sure that the team members or staff members remain safe. That also then means that working from home could be a viable alternative, whether you rent or you buy to stay in. Now, I think one of the questions I really wanted to ask you is that because of this work from home, which could be a semi-permanent norm moving forward, especially in the knowledge economy, the digital 4.0 economy takes over here in Malaysia or takes root in Malaysia, do you think then people may look at suburban or even rural or fringe to urban rural living as an alternative, whereby prices are much lower, provided that, you know, tech infrastructure is strong, and they can actually stay there, work there, and of course, because the cost of living is lower there, could enable them to actually purchase those properties. Do you think that could be possible?
Yes and no. Okay, number one, if working from home, yes, is getting more popular because I have even like buyers. I have buyers who say they want to buy a property, but the property need to have a space for their so-called workplace, you know, in their house, like what you said. So they need an extra room to convert into an office to work from home. And people say that, you know, I don't need to a big kitchen, I don't need to have a big living hall or things like that because it's going to take up space and it's going to be more expensive. So they don't cook at home anymore. They don't. They spend more time working in the house, in their residential place per se. Now, when you come to that is their work life, but when you come to their social life style per se, this group of people, especially the Gen X, Gen Y kind of people, they still have an urge of what you call society living. That means they want to be near some shopping complex. They want to be near to some eateries. They want to be near to some gyms. They want to be near to place they can hang out. So they still want to be somewhere that is close to their friends, close to their members or whatever they call. So suburb, yes, cost will be cheaper. It will be viable, but the lifestyle of these young people, they still prefer the city lifestyle because we notice that the developers are going into suburb. They because land is cheaper, everything is cheaper, things are affordable. But whether you like it or not, the take-up rate is not that encouraging. People are still preferring the hot area there where they can hang out, they can chill out after their work, or they can just go out and where they order, you know, for example, they order Grab food or Panda food. They don't want to have places that people don't deliver. So, you know, they still want to have somewhere. But so in terms of their social lifestyles, they still want to be in the city. But in terms of working, they may not, they don't need that. They can work from home, things like that. But to me, eventually, to me, this is my belief lah. I don't think working from home can be like, it's probably going to be affecting probably 20% or 30% of the way you work, but it won't entirely like saying that, oh, you don't need an office anymore, you don't need an office. You still have to meet clients, you still have to go to office for meetings, things like that. So that also play into some factors. They want to be near to their workplace, things like that. So you ask me, yes and no, unless the public transport is good, they can link up to the suburb area, and there are substantial facilities, amenities for them to be there. So they don't need to really travel to KL or PJ just to get stuff. Just like, for example, I think a very good example is Setia Alam. I think Setia Alam is a very good example. People who live there, those days, then if they need something, they need to come to KL. But now the township is self-sustained. So then they don't need to. So unless you can build another township that is self-sustained, then it may work. But if not, you just build for the sake of building because it's cheap, but the township has nothing there, then I don't think it will work.
So sustainability of the community is important, right? As opposed to just
Yes.
someplace out in the real rural area where connectivity is a challenge.
Yeah, for example, another example is Putra Heights. I'm not to downplay the place. Putra Heights has a very good township. Everything is very nice, but for some reason, people, the take-up rate is not there because it's not like a Setia Alam kind of thing. So that could be a factor of that as well.
So if I understand what you've just said, Kenan, what you're saying is that the critical mass for commerce is not that in order for the services to be provided and according to the people who are staying there. And because of that, although it's a very livable place, so from what I'm hearing from you, the example you shared about Putra Heights is very livable, but because the services that are not there are insufficient, makes it difficult for people who do stay there on a permanent basis 24/7 to actually get what they need, and therefore they may need to also come out.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Do you think that, Kenan, one of the options, because the property prices are very high, do you think that co-living would be an option that could be happening instead of just RTO?
Oh yeah, I think developers, especially when you look into developers now, they build a lot of so-called dual key or triple key. I don't know what kind of things they have where one unit they could divide into a few units. I think that could be a possibility. I'm not gonna. There's also could be a possibly. We have people who we call it co-ownership. Is that one unit? You can have 3 owners, strangers, totally strangers, right? Who own the 3 units. It could be that way. So it's like, for example, a dual key. Dual key, you still have one single unit owner, but you split the unit into 2 and you rent it out half of it. But what happens if this dual key unit, this same unit, one title, but 2 owners, you own half of it, I own half of it. That could be something like that. Co-ownership. It could be because they want to, the house is getting more expensive. So co-living, probably yes, there could be, because there are actually a lot of I wouldn't say it's co-living. I say they are indirectly co-living. There are some people who bought a unit and they divide, the house into 3, 4, 5 rooms, things like.
Oops, I think I may have lost Kenan for a little bit.
No, sorry.
Yeah. I lost you for a bit. You mentioned just now about co-living. About co-living.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, co-living. Yeah, I think it's possible because we talk about co-ownership. I mentioned about co-ownership just now, right?
Yep.
Did I?
Yes, you mentioned about co-ownership.
Yeah, so I said co-ownership could be one thing that where few owners, few owners can be in their own property, they're strangers and they own a property, all right? That could be a possibility. And because now I think when you look at the dual key, all these things, dual key where you still have a single owner, but you just split the units into half. You rent out the other half. But now I think I said there are actually a lot of co-living out there. Indirectly, people are getting a house and they divide into a few rooms. Then they make it like a dormitory or things like that. Where people, but the way they do it is they rent it out lah. But it's just very similar to a co-working space also. You don't need to own an office. You just go there and rent a place, and that place is yours. I think is possible, but maybe not now lah, because I think our culture, we are still not really receptive of all this kind of co-living yet at this moment. So, but that could be a possibility in future. Yeah.
Okay. Lastly, Kenan, thanks so much for, again, sharing your thoughts and time with us. But I wanted to just ask one final comment and thought from you with regard to the future of real estate here in Malaysia. Do you see that this new change in life, this new change in work, and this new change in terms of the property prices rising very fast in comparison to the incomes, and then now with incomes being, the sustainability and consistency of incomes may be at question because of the economic turbulence, do you see real estate, especially residential real estate coming down in prices and may not necessarily be the key investable product for the younger generation, who may choose to actually say, fine, if there's a price that's affordable, I may look at it, but I may not want to get stuck with a 30-year loan. So I'm just going to really think about renting for life, or just grouping 4 or 5 people. We buy one property together, we all share in it. At least we have something to just rent or stay in our own room in that property. Do you see that as the new reality or potential new reality?
Okay. If you ask me, the reality now, if I look at now, the reality is there's a mismatch in the purchaser who buy property. Mismatch meaning to say that they buy, for example, they want something, right? They want a house which has this, has that, but because they can't afford it, so they just buy whatever they can afford, right? Rather than, because those days I still remember many years ago when we look at an apartment, if you tell me Ernest's apartment is 450 square feet, 1 bedroom, 700 square feet, 2 bedroom, you saying that, how can you live in a 400 square feet apartment? You need at least 1,000. So those days you buy because you need 1,000 square feet. Now you buy is because you cannot afford 1,000 square feet, so you just buy whatever is there because you need a place to stay. So that is the trend now that I'm looking at. Now then, the second trend that I'm looking now is why, like what you said, why do I need to have 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 properties? If I can buy, I just buy one. I'm going to live there for the rest of my life. That's it. I don't need to have second property. I don't need to have third property, because I simply can't afford it. I'm just talking about general. I don't want to talk about those super rich. I talk about the general. If I have the down payment to buy a property I want now, for me to buy a second, third, I would struggle to come up with 10% of 600,000 or 500,000, right? So I don't need that kind of like what you said, stress or whatever. I just use my money and buy whatever I can afford. So that is a trend, and because of that, the third thing is the consumer behavior. What we spend on more money now, the priority changes. Okay, people spend things on technology, right? People subscribe to things more. People order, for example, they spend more on so-called other things, right? They don't eat so much anymore. I mean, they don't eat at home. They order food outside. They spend more on transportation. They spend more on education. They spend more on healthcare, things like that. So their priority changes. I don't need a house because my house can last me forever. All right. So that is the current trend that I look at. Now, if you talk about future, whether they are going to share this or this or not. Now, to me, it really there's one thing that factor that I look into is how can the government, there's one external factor that we always talk about is how can government come in to whatever stimulate or what they call change the things, is how can the government actually encourage people to invest in buying property, encourage people to buy property, things like that. There's another thing that I think the government should look into also, because now the government, one thing that I think you mentioned just now is rental, which just struck me, the rent to own thing, right? There's something is very interesting that I think in somehow rather I think if you ask me personally, I think there's something is worth studying into detail, because now a lot of people are not aware. I mean, they know about this, but they don't know how it really works. It's very vague. They say that, do I pay rental? What kind of costs, what kind of expenses? What is going to happen if I decided not to rent, or decided to buy up early? Things, there are a lot of gray area that's not ironed out, and there's not a lot of standardization. Different bank works differently. By the way, not many banks are into this. There are only a couple of banks into it. So if the government can help in these kind of things, that you rent now, buy later, that could be one way it could help. And the other thing is creation of job and creation of job, and also stimulation of the economy. that would also affect also the way we invest properly, the way we behave. So in terms of future, I think the government need to step in to do something about it, if you ask me, to change the kind of mindset of the consumer things like that. Because the way I look at it now, the trend is like what you say lah. I don't need to have a second or third property. Why should I? Let my kids take care of themselves or things like that. That's one thing. Like, if you don't mind, if I just add on a little bit, there are also two types of consumer out there we are talking about. The baby boomers, right? The baby boomers who own properties, right? They have a lot of properties. Now their question is whether should I keep or should I sell or things like that. Let's say I have 5 properties now. There are some people who have 5 properties, and what should I do with the property? Should I sell or should I keep it? Right? So for this group of people also, they would think that, I bought it cheap many years ago and I don't have to pay any more installment. I just need to rent it out for these people. And these are the people who can just keep renting. So my advice to these people is that don't sell. If you ask me, if you have a property now, don't sell. If you bought it like many years ago at a good price, don't sell. Because if you ask me, I don't think the property price is going to go down any how soon. It's just probably going to hover around there. Yeah.
Well, the latest, just to add on to what you've mentioned, the latest economist report also shows that property prices, despite the economic turmoil around the world and the COVID pandemic, property prices are still in the uptrend. And they don't foresee that falling too far below. When they say too far below, it's not going to go down to 50% below the current prices. There may be some adjustments, but they still see that overall it's still going to be an uptrend. So the demand for property outstrips the supply of property in most locations around the world. So this is the report I just read. And it's quite interesting to see that at the end of the day, it's a basic necessity. Shelter is a basic necessity. And what better way to make sure that you actually protect your future by making sure that the shelter is permanent for yourself at the very least. And then if you have extra, then you can think about either extension of your family members or the next generation in terms of helping them as well to get along, because it's not going to get cheaper, I think, as what you've said. Quite interestingly. Well, Kian Aun, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you've just heard and you like what we've learned today or what you've learned today, you can always click subscribe and also get all the alerts whenever we have anything that's new to actually help you with your property journey and making better financial decisions. This is a Fireside Chat with Mr. Tan Kian Aun. We thank you again for your time and we look forward to seeing you next round. Thank you very much.
Welcome, Ernest. Thank you.
Thank you.